So one of the things we've done historically that we have not touched at the transfer flow yet, but I've done in the past, is we want reader feedback as to what you want to hear us talk about. We went through this whole summer. We kind of did our own thing, and the summer kept us so busy with so many interesting stories that we focused on the news in front of us. But we're going to take an episode or two to be able to answer your questions and your thoughts on what you'd like us to cover. If you have suggestions, please hop onto YouTube and put your suggestions in the comments on this episode here, and we will then get back to your stuff as soon as we can. Also, at the end of the week, there is the launch of Variance Betting. That will be our premium subscription, and we will be covering my bets for the Premier League and the Championship. We'll also be delivering the market implied numbers for your own betting purposes. And the point of variance betting is to basically teach you to win another bet or two every single month and have a bit of fun, and also make fun of me when I go through horrible losing streaks, which every bettor goes through, but not everybody will tell you about. All right, stay tuned. Hello, and welcome back to the Transfer Flow podcast. My name is Ted Knutson. I am the CEO and founder, and I am here joined by Ravi Ramaneni, who is our oftentimes co-host, about to take a journey across the United States.
Hey, Ted. Glad to be here again. Thanks. Yeah, and also there is a hurricane coming through Houston. That's kind of like a parting gift for us, I think.
Run, Ravi, run!
So we had to change our route, and we had to bring in a day in advance. We're moving, so everything like packing, everything got to be on a compressed time frame.
If Ravi's background looks funny and it sounds echoey, it's because all of his stuff is in boxes getting ready to go to New Jersey. Am I not allowed to say that? Have I doxed you?
No, that's fine. I mean, okay. New Jersey is big enough.
So today we're going to cover a controversial analytics statement from someone as part of the community. We're going to talk about Chelsea's owner backlash. There's been lots of conversation. Chelsea were the main character of the summer, and now the leaks are coming out about a controversial statement behind the scenes. We're also going to talk about Arsenal's injury situation. There's a reason why you have a second 11, and they're going to need it. And finally, we're going to wrap up with the MLS transfer window and all of the things that you need to know about that for a very specialized set of rules of engagement there. So if you're interested in the broader ecosystem of transfers, it's there. Let's kick it off with an analytics hot take from a member of the community, Tim Keach, who runs the analytics consultancy, and I think they do some tools over at Market Insights. This is not an advertisement for them, but we like to cite our sources. So Keach had a tweet that he put out that said, hot take of the day, I think analytics for player recruitment has been solved for a while. Lots of nice to have extras are there, but the fundamentals of A, is the player good? And B, can he fit our system, are done. Better uses of time than putting money into these areas. What do you think about that, Ravi, especially given how long you've been around the scene?
Well, first of all, I've spoken to Tim Keach before. Nice guy, very smart too. They've been doing good work for many years.
We're not being mean. We're just giving a response to a take.
But I think that I disagree with his statement just because there is a lot, just having been both inside a club and also founding a startup to do analytics. I think there is a lot to do. I can quickly give a summary of what we know today in football analytics, so that can give you an idea of what we don't know. So years ago, the COVID season, we did a conference in Seattle, and I did a combined talk with one of our coaches, Gonzalo Pineda at the time, assistant coach. He was a former Mexican player, played in the World Cup. So very good football mind. The way he breaks down football is like every action in football has three parts. One is, let's say an action is a pass. One is perception, then decision, and execution. So perception is, okay, Declan Rice has the ball in the midfield. Perception is what he sees around him, where are the other players? Where is my teammates? Where are the opponents? Where is the pressure coming from? Decision is deciding which is the best action to do. Which pass? Do I pass a longer, riskier ball to Odegaard, or do I just pass backwards to Saliba? And then that's decision. And execution is the actual pass where, okay, you do it. So football analytics, for the most part, has solved the execution part. Today we can say whether you can pass, or if a pass is made, is it good or not, or is it completed or not, or if a shot is taken, is it on target, was it a goal? And you could also solve, or football analytics has also solved some of the perception part, where we have tracking data and broadcast tracking data to be able to perceive pressure, to be able to know where the opponents are, where the teammates are. So it has.
I want to be a little cautious on that bit, because actually, like, only some things have that data, right? Like even at StatsBomb, we went broad with it. We had 38 leagues that we were covering with 360. I think when we were working on our tracking beta, we were probably closer in the 70 to 80 range. The reason why it's difficult to make this very widely scalable is different qualities of video and also different heights of cameras.
Yeah.
So like if you're building a tracking data model, and this is super nerdy, but if you're building a tracking data model, it's very useful to have multiple cameras, which you don't have at scale ever, or you need to be able to have like a nice high camera angle that can see everything that's happening on the pitch. And very, very rarely do you have any sort of interference with occlusions and things like that. The lower the camera angle, the more occlusions you get across in front of you, and the more difficult it becomes for the tracking to be able to solve that. The other thing that you have is we talked to FIFA, and FIFA actually, they loved our tracking data generation platform so much that they asked if they could license it at StatsBomb. And we were like, first of all, I never thought about that. And second of all, I don't know what the business model for that looks like, because we sell data. Like, so the tool bit that you're then selling on to however many, hundreds of millions of people in your broadcast is slightly different. But they were like, oh God, pairing the data and the event data with the tracking data is so miserable. It's so lossy. And especially if you don't have good ball tracking, like you just have all these things you have to have lots of humans be able to do. And FIFA are very willing to throw lots of humans at a game. We've seen when they collect the World Cup, they threw 25 collectors at a single game in order to track the information. But again, at scale, that all falls apart. And so you only have some of the picture of the detailed stuff around pressures, around space, around what's available to you in the data analytics space across the breadth of the thing. So if you're a Premier League team that only recruits from 20 leagues, you're probably fine.
That's fair.
If you're one of the sort of like Belgian, or you've got like a Croatia, you've got a nice Swiss where you can bring in players from all over the world. It actually is a more compounded, difficult problem, because you want the lower league information. Anyway, so continuing on, we're sort of there, but we're still a couple years away.
Yeah, we're sort of there. I think there's a lot to be done still there, and we haven't even touched or scratched the surface of decision part of that. So I think just to make the long story short, I think there is still a lot of ground to cover in this space. And then there is the other side of this, is football clubs, how they're using information. And this is, I go back to the talk that I did at StatsBomb conference last year, is one of the problems today is not information, but you have different levels of information that are bombarding the sporting director or the decision makers. And there is no hierarchy, or like there is no clear hierarchy of how do you value 4 years of data-based scouting versus 10 games of a scout watching video versus 2 games of scout watching live versus 45 minutes sporting director going to a game and the player just maybe gets injured or gets a red card, and then the best friend of the sporting director, who he trusts most in the industry, texting him, hey, this guy is not a team player.
Those guys are a menace. Those guys are just like the worst.
So like, that's like, I think this talk is actually online somewhere. It is online. But anyway, that's the TLDR of it, that this information hierarchy, that's a different problem to solve.
And then you get the execution part. So then you're able to tease out like what they do, but are they good at, and can they be improved is like the big question there. So like as recruitment sort of populations get closer to optimization, meaning like we have the right price for what guys have done or what girls have done on their seasons, then the question then becomes, where can we find the raw assets where we can take them, we can coach them up, we can adjust some of their skills to then improve them dramatically, so that the price we pay here can then become a much higher price over the next couple of years. I think the other thing that I think, I think that this is not tapped out at all. And I'm somebody who's existed in this for a really long time. I have yet to see somebody come forward with a holistic, interesting passing framework. Like passing is the most important thing in the whole game. And
also you have a lot of events of passing.
It's a ton of events, but like, football or soccer, is a passing game that has shots on the end of it. It is not a
Mhm.
shooting game, because like everything that happens in the middle of the pitch, you know, the goofy meme that people put, like, you know, good at this end, good at this end, whatever happens in the middle, like who knows? That's actually the important part of the
Yeah.
game.
Wha-
And
One, yeah, for sure. Yeah, one other part that I want to add, just to tie to something that's in the current discussion. I read a piece this morning about Victor Gyökeres, in the Guardian, talking about how he's kind of lighting a fire, Portuguese league, playing for Sporting, and he should be fine just moving over to a powerhouse in England and doing it. Now that's a problem if you ask sporting directors, how do players translate from a league to another league? From what I know, like there are some heuristics and there are maybe some metrics that you could use them as proxies. But if you want to spend 85 or 90 million pounds on a striker coming from a league where he plays for one of the big three and just gets a ton of goals against mostly much weaker opposition, then how is he going to translate? I think that's a question that if you talk to any decision maker in football that signs players and that has to do this every day, within a half an hour, if the discussion is going well, he will ask you about this. And it is that important, and that's not solved yet.
well, it's not possible to solve. That's the thing that people lose sight of. So we have seen many a time, like from decades ago, or well, maybe 15 years, you'll get quantitative people, especially from the gambling side, who want to come into the industry, whether that's the football side of sport or the gambling side of football. And they're like, all right, well, we can just solve this. Like, as long as we've got, you know, the information, we can solve this. And they quickly realize that there are a few different problems. One is that the data doesn't exist for all of the things you want to solve. And that was something that, you know, StatsBomb was founded and created their own data off the back of part of that. But then the other side of it is the connectivity for models around the world also doesn't exist, because you're not seeing the Brazilian league play the Swiss league on any sort of frequency.
Yeah.
And even if you wanted to do it on a player by player basis, how often are you seeing a player move from the Portuguese league to the Premier League in a particular position, which is also, you know, an issue, right? Some positions seem to have success. Their skills are translatable. Some positions don't seem to have success. And in fact, on a player by player basis, now you're looking at player factors. Like, is this a big, strong center forward that's going to get bullied by center backs in the Premier League? But they've been able to bully the center backs in the league that they exist in, and that's one reason why they've been successful. Or are they like a pace-based player that, you know, can still manage to compete in most different circumstances? Are they great with the ball in tight spaces? All these things are elements of what do you know about the player? What can we quantify about the player? And then what is unknown? And the what is unknown factor is really, really large. If you can narrow that down by bits and pieces, that's great. I don't know, maybe Tim was trying to say, you know, the 80-20 of this is relatively solved. Maybe that's what the statement was, and it was lost in some of the Twitter. And that's probably true. Like, when you come at it from a data perspective and a generalized model perspective, yeah, we can give you 80% of the information, but you can't really get to 95%. And for many of the teams that are spending big money, 95%, a few extra blips of confidence on what you're able to do, that's worth like 500 or $1 million a year.
Yeah, and it's a sport with a lot of variance to begin with, and you want to make these decisions like as the confidence interval as high as possible, the bands as narrow as possible. So I think we definitely have ways to go to get there.
Well, and the widespread physical data, which still is not really there, especially when it's tied into actions, gives you the ability to be a little more predictive about how players are recovering from injury, which I think actually is like a big gap. And one of the things you're most uncertain about and most insecure about should you be signing a player. So anyway, I don't want to sort of belabor that set of points, but I thought it was an interesting talking point. And given you and I have had a long history of making mistakes in this industry, maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Moving right along to the main characters of the summer. We're back to Chelsea, but in this case, what we saw in the summertime was a lot of people were defending Chelsea's moves and saying, oh, they've got a plan. They clearly know better than everybody else. Shouldn't you give them the benefit of the doubt? And I'm actually often of the contrarian perspective that, I'm willing to listen to someone that wants to do things differently, as long as I can make sense of it at the end of the day. Like, does it all add up? Or in some cases, you're like, no, this is all hype. And the reality is things are much worse behind the scenes. You just don't know the details yet. Well, as of this week in the international break, we started to see lots of details flow out about a rift between Chelsea ownership and how there's a Boehly group that, sort of, I guess, primary owner Todd Boehly, who is not the majority shareholder, but is currently the chairman, has over here. And he's taken somewhat of a backseat, at least allegedly, in the football operations. And then there's a Bedad Egbali group who is leading the Clear Lake side of it that seems to be much more hands-on and active and really likes player trading. Now, again, these are the leaks so far. These are the things that are being pushed out to the media. We don't know the truth of it, but it does explain a lot of the sort of disjointed thinking and actions that we've seen from Chelsea over the last couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. I think, anytime we're talking egos the size of Texas and having to coexist and work together, that's always, that rarely works. And I think what we're seeing here is a lot of that. And usually when people like this take over, when big groups take over clubs, either you go slow in the beginning just because you're learning the new sport and the new league and a new country, new regulations, and it's a new market, everything. It's nothing like baseball or anything in the US. Or you hire experts and get out of the way to a degree. Maybe you still want to have some say, but you get out of the way to a degree to let them do their work. And maybe while they're doing it, you learn, and probably in a few years you take the lead role. Obviously, clearly that didn't happen here. This is very different. I think they came in and, right away.
He was initially the interim sporting director, and you're like, ooh.
That's like, just think about it. Like an owner that has never run a team or like have like grounding in football, not watching the game, but just running or, working inside the game, suddenly becomes acting sporting director, making all the decisions about who to sign, who to retain, who to extend, or who to let go. That's always very difficult.
Maybe he played a lot of Football Manager.
Maybe
when you rack up enough hours, you can do anything in the game.
For sure. I guess it reminds me of Rui Faria, but I think Rui Faria took coaching badges after that. But anyway, like I think that I can see where the confidence comes from, because they've amassed tons of money, and they are billionaires for a reason, and they think that, well, we're really good at investing and making that investments multiply. Well, we're going to take this and we'll show how we can multiply the investment in football also, and yeah, so I can see where the confidence comes from, but I think that it's definitely gone beyond confidence. And then having two of them sort of competing, or even at least like at that type of thing is like a cocktail of, I don't know, C4.
Yeah, first of all, like, you can't have two different captains that are piloting the boat, right? Like that doesn't work. Like, you can have people that help, but at some point it's the captain's responsibility to make a lot of decisions. Chelsea are still having problems landing a couple of their talents that they want to put out on loan. One of them, there was a deal for a forward, I think, that fell through today that was supposed to go to Athens. They're still looking for places to let these assets continue to play and mature. But the transfer window is working against them there, because there's only so much time to be able to do that. I think the other issue that you see, and I feel a little bit sorry for Chelsea fans. I'm not a Chelsea fan, but like, I feel a little sorry for them, is that you have seen a lot of waste. You've seen some of the club sort of identity that you would have, like, about the academy and stuff like that. That's been chucked out the door. There allegedly was not complete agreement on the Pochettino changeover, which I think also is like,
yeah.
That's a big surprise and a big deal, and a very expensive one potentially. Although the U.S. national team is also trying to negotiate him out of there so he can become their coach. So that's a little weird. And the other thing is now, like, what is the conclusion of this war look like, or this just disagreement? Let's say let's bring it down a notch. This disagreement between very, very rich owners. Somebody has to stump up, billions of dollars in order to buy the other ones out, so that you can run this as a holistic entity. Or they both have to sell, or they have to find some kind of détente to figure out like how Chelsea runs going forward. That's a really complicated process, some of which may be fought in the media, but at the end of the day, giant egos, giant paychecks, giant bank account balances. You got to resolve this in order to make the footballing entity continue forward.
Yeah, and it seems like from what we see in the leaks that both parties want to buy out the other one, which is also pretty insane.
Again, irrational confidence.
Yeah,
like, no, we got it. Like, we're gonna fix it. It's the other guy's fault.
Yeah. Anyway, I do think that it's definitely like, we talked about kind of the investment fund model and how that is not football club with football players are not similar to that as much as you want to run your company that way, or you run Chelsea as a company of investment. So I think that's something, probably a realization, and also maybe the multiples they want, or the way they wanted to multiply revenue and all their metrics. They probably realized that it's going to take much longer, if at all, to get there.
Almost nobody makes money coming out the other side of football as an owner. Like it has happened sometimes. It happened a lot on the way up as league rights, video rights were continuing to increase, every 3-4 years. Now it seems like they've topped out, and pretty much all of the commercial revenues at the top of the chain are difficult to extract further value. So yeah, it's at this point it's a big ask. Matthew Benham also recently in the news, allegedly looking for a minority, large-pocketed co-investor for Brentford at a £400 million valuation, which they look at it and say the club was, 167 million in revenue last year. It's not a very punchy multiple on that. But again, there's uncertainty around it, and Brentford don't have a huge stadium, and they still, they don't have a huge following outside of West London, where they have a moderate following, really. So yeah, it's the type of thing where like you might look forever for that type of thing. That type of investor / co-owner. And then you still have to worry about what happened at Chelsea, who apparently had multiple investments in the past together, and it didn't play out very well for them. One group that I will say seems to make this operate well is Blitzer and Harris, which is unusual. So they had Philadelphia 76ers. They recently have the Washington Commanders, formerly Redskins of the NFL, New Jersey Devils, and then they were part of a minority ownership group in Crystal Palace. I think they still are. And then they've sort of splintered off into their own sort of footballing ecosystems.
Yeah,
but
they also own the Real Salt Lake, the MLS franchise.
I think, is Harris involved in that? I know it's like Blitzer's thing, but I wasn't sure if Josh had that.
I'm not 100% sure. I thought they
see exactly who owns what, where, and what percentages. Impossible for us from the outside to keep track of.
Yeah, for sure.
Also impossible to keep track of Arsenal's injury situation, which just seems to continue to accumulate. As much hope as Arsenal fans might have had coming into this season, we have now, last night, Martin Odegaard seemed to at least have a badly sprained ankle as part of his Norway duties in international window. We also have Mikel Merino, who's a new pickup in midfield. He has a fracture and is out for 2 to 3 months. We don't know what the diagnosis is on Odegaard yet. If it's ligament damage, it could be their most important midfielder potentially, or you could say Rice is the other one. And Rice then, obviously, in the last game picked up what some Arsenal fans believe is a phantom second yellow card and is now suspended for the North London derby. A tiny little blip on the seasonal calendar for most Arsenal and Spurs fans. But now they have to go into this game, this match, which is a tiny little blip and a really big deal. And they have to have basically an entire second midfield. I guess this is why it really matters that you have good recruitment and you can field the second midfield.
Yeah.
But feels terrible.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing is like, it's also going off of a game where they dropped 2 points. They justifiably feel that way. And I think that's a home game. It's circumstances, red card. But I think that's the way the Premier League is sort of at the top. It's so stratified. Even if you lose 2 points, it feels like, oh my God, it's so hard to claw back. But
There
you
have
have
been
to,
so many titles won with 90 plus points in the last few years that it just feels like you have no room for error.
yeah. But I think you have to back yourself, and even if this first game is going to be difficult, it's still the fourth match of 38, and there is still 34 matches, and everybody's got to play. They still have to play City twice, and
Oh man, you sound like somebody who's been in a locker room and having to coach people up about some adversity here, Ravi. Like you're speaking all the lines.
well, I've been in one for 10 years, so I guess I can't get that out of me. But anyway, I do think that it'll be a tough game, but it's not the end of the world. Whatever the result be, but I think that I can understand why it feels like that right now.
If Odegaard's out for a couple of months, that probably
Yeah.
impacts like
Mm-hmm.
Arsenal's potential points by maybe 6 on the season. Like you take their most influential attacking midfielder, like maybe they can grind things out. Arteta's group has basically been able to put together extended runs of suffer ball where they play a really irritating middle block and a lot of very low event matches especially, and then they hope that they're able to create some magic either via set pieces or via some skill on the other end. Like you could just see them try to shut up shop there. Obviously having to play some combination of Jorginho, Partey, maybe Havertz, maybe Zinchenko in midfield, like that hurts everybody. And it's a sort of a misfit toy set of players versus what they expect to play on a week by week basis. But it's also something they could potentially make work. It's not easy and it's not fun, and it won't be that enjoyable to watch probably for most Arsenal fans.
Yeah, probably. And I think that the other part here is also that the Champions League is a little more charitable in terms of you have 8 matches and it's not like a group phase anymore. It's like a overall table. You still want to finish in the top 8, but I think you have a bit more room for error there. So that should ease the situation somewhat.
But the knock on from injuries is that the other guys all have to play more minutes, right? Like you're less likely to chop and change because you need your game changers more. So it really does stress out the whole squad, not just the replacements on that. One thing that I do hate, that I've hated every year, and the COVID year or 2-year break actually gave us a respite from this. I hate the September international break. Hate it. I loathe the thing. You just get started in the season. Suddenly guys are like tossed back into their national teams after they've been through like a long preseason. Things are rolling. It's a really awkward break. This is the one that I hate more than anything else. October and November, you're sort of pretty happy to see like a little break in the calendar. Everybody wants a different rhythm. It's getting dark outside, stuff like that. But this one's the worst.
Yeah. And I mean, now with Nations League, all these games have become very competitive or a lot more competitive than they used to be, which means that you're adding more stress to the entire system, that these games cannot be just, oh, I'm just going to play 30 minutes in this game. Like if you're like a established starter at a top level team, they have to play 70, 80 minutes in these games.
Players need to manage themselves a little bit. Like you basically need to not take the hit from being able to say, look, I'm knackered. The more fatigued I am, the more likely I am to pick up injuries, not just like might have a worse performance. And I'm at the 70 game mark this season or over the last calendar year. Like I need to be able to not push myself any further because like my career really matters. It's not that I don't want to be good for England, but it's a random September. Like why?
Yeah.
Or Norway, who like Norway probably need Odegaard more than anybody else.
Yeah. It's basically you raise the leverage or stakes on those games which were low in the past to a level where the coaches there are very, they're not willing to because it's their future. If they lose 2 games and they get relegated to Group B or League B, that's like the most bizarre thing. Like you can't do this in for like international windows.
Yeah, and it's the players that take the brunt of it, and there are probably too many disparate international groups that to be able to form a proper union and just say no. But there are lots of entities that want more matches so that they can have more revenue to then be able to spend on different stuff. But at the end of the day, the players have to be able to be on the pitch and to protect themselves and their outputs. And I think that's something we'll continue to see play out in the future. Let's shift gears a little bit here, and let's go back to where you're living and where I grew up, which is the United States. For those of you who aren't aware, the Major League Soccer, but Major League Soccer, MLS, has a different window set. They are a summertime league. There are probably, 5 to 10 sort of medium to major summertime leagues that happen. Some in Scandinavia. There's the Irish League that I think also exists. And then obviously you get MLS, you get Canada. Places that have real winter tend to sort of align across the summertime calendar. That usually works from a March to November type period. And then their off season is the winter time. And with it comes, MLS in particular has its own really weird set of rules. You've got a lot of acronyms about, whether somebody fits into your salary cap. They actually have a salary cap with some exceptions. So Ravi, who used to be one of the people that worked in that league and now continues to advise some top teams in that league, I wanted to be able to talk about this because one interesting thing from people who follow us and they might be interested in a career there is MLS pays real money. There was a recent job posting for a women's team that actually was sort of a director of recruitment that looked like it was about $200,000 a year. We saw, I think 5 years ago, a huge change in the industry when I was at StatsBomb, where they went from just a couple of teams that had analysts like you. Your group were early to it. Toronto FC were pretty early to it. And then we just 20 teams snapped up analytics talent over the course of a winter or a year. And now basically every team has it, bar a couple sort of holdouts. And not only do they have it, but they know that they need to invest in it. They know that they need to invest in the data packages, and they're bringing it in as part of the sort of fabric of how the club operates. So I thought this was a good excuse to be able to talk about this because one, I think European salaries are going to start to adjust to match more what happens in MLS soon. Otherwise, they won't be able to get the top talent. But two, if you are looking for one of these jobs, maybe you should look in America because they're paying well and they sometimes let you influence things.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think based on my experience working with clubs, both in the continental Europe, not inside the club, but just dealing with people there and working in MLS, I think definitely people are more open here with information and data analytics. So MLS is a summer league, as Ted just described, and their summer window, which is between July and August, is their secondary window. Their primary window is in the winter period. That is because that's when their league starts, and they usually have 3 months of that at the time and 1 month of the summer window because the FIFA mandate is every league can have only about 4 months of transfer period. What this does is that it creates some mismatches here. So for example, this season, MLS summer window was between July 18th and August 15th or 16th.
It's tiny. And
it's tiny.
It's like the wintertime window for the English teams. You have to get stuff done. And what it also causes, and we actually have seen some leagues be able to take advantage of this here in Europe. The Premier League at one point changed it so that they were able to end their transfer window earlier so that players would be able to be in by the time the first game started. What they found was that everybody else in Europe was taking advantage of their need to act first, and they were extracting additional rents because of it. For MLS, maybe it's just a little too compressed is what we saw this last time around, but it's caused some really interesting plus weird plus sad behavior, I think, depending on what perspective you take.
Yeah, for sure. And so what ends up happening is that they are finishing August 15th around that time frame, but the European window still has 2 weeks to go, 2 full weeks to go. So they would work on a deal. They would come to a point where, we make our final offer, or what looks like a final offer of, let's say, 10 million or 15 million transfer for a player. They agree terms with the player in terms of salary. But the club in Europe is, if we get 15, if I can use this offer of 15 million from MLS and parlay that and then put pressure on teams in Europe, they could probably give me 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up happening is that MLS teams end up losing deals this way, or player moves. A couple of the big ones that actually the sporting director of the team came out and told is one of them is Josh Sargent. Since he was FC Cincinnati made an offer for him in the range of $20 million. I think that's what was reported.
It's a big fee for
it's
MLS
a big fee.
teams.
Like MLS doesn't pay that 20 million fee often. I think it could have been a record or close to a record. And Norwich didn't want to sell because they had a higher valuation put on the player. And you can see Norwich's point of view too, is that if they let him go, they have to find a replacement in the last 2 weeks of the window. So they were probably not willing to do it unless it's an offer they can't refuse. So you could run into this. But if this was, let's say if this was the windows were synchronized and if they did it on the last day, then that is the last offer. And if Norwich felt at that point like, well, we need to take this, or any team, not Norwich, but any team felt like they want to take that offer, they could take it. There is more likelihood of closing the deal if the windows were aligned.
But the problem on the MLS side is like you lose an additional 2 weeks of player time, which may or may not impact you. A lot of times what happens in MLS is like the bigger team or the bigger deals get done in the winter time, but then they take place once that summer window actually opens up for movement. It feels like MLS needs to do one of two things. They need to either align with the European end so that they're not able to get leveraged in that way, or they need to move like to the start, basically end their window at the start of August. So that way you're not as close as being able to be included and overrun by all of the European business. So it's like, look, if we get this done here, then that's fine. Like we get him out early. You guys have time, early on in your training camp to be able to tie that deal off, replace them, whatever. Right now they're getting run over by the European stuff, which still has a bit more money to spend than the American leagues.
Yeah, and what they are balancing is that they usually, like MLS, like after the August, when the window closes, they have about 8 or 9 games left before the regular season finishes. So it's a mad rush to get into the playoffs. And with the way the visa and immigration stuff works, you want to get the deal done so that the player is signed when the window opens so you can start. Because the thing is, conservatively, it takes about 3 to 4 weeks to get a visa. Sometimes you could get it in 2 weeks, but it's not something in the control of any football people here. Now we're talking immigration.
Now you're handing things to the government and hoping that they come back quickly, which good luck with that in every single phase of your life.
Especially immigration. I mean, I'm sure people in Britain are very, very well aware of that. So then let's say you close the deal by mid-August and it takes another 3 weeks to get a visa. By the time the player steps on the field or eligible to step on the field, you only have 4 or 5 matches left for the season. So if you spend a big money and you're out of playoff contention, that would be seen as a waste, because then you don't have another chance, and you rather save the money and spend it in winter so that the player can play from the beginning of the season.
Yeah, you see like 4 or 5 months of wages as well, which is useful for any team.
Yeah, and so I think that they need to. I think synchronizing the summer window to end probably is the best solution. I think that's probably what they're trying to do, is that, and maybe even do another thing they could do is that they could split FIFA doesn't mandate how to split that 4 months. So they could do is that they could do 2 months in the summer and 2 months in the winter. Because in the winter, once the European window closes at the beginning of February, only players you can get out of the teams at the time are players that are surplus or that teams don't want, or just so you're probably picking off of leftovers at that point. Yep. So even though you have an advantage that your window is still open, you're not really getting the top talent. And MLS in the last few years have gone for players that are still very much in demand even in Europe. Not in every case, but the number of cases like that are increasing because the amount of investment is increasing in MLS.
So one interesting thing that happened, I think, about 2 weeks ago is that as part of the Women's League collective bargaining agreement, basically they did away with their draft. And draft is sort of a pretty unique American concept. At one point, I suggested to all of my friends, I was like, what would be awesome is if teams could draft Juve players as they were relegated for Calciopoli stuff. That would have been amazing. Like, throw that on a pay-per-view. Who wouldn't pay for everyone in the world having like a 24-hour period to be able to draft out Juve players? But anyway, so in both leagues in the US, both men's and women's, they have a collegiate draft. And just recently, the women's league has done away with that draft, which means that basically women are coming out of that as free agents. Potentially, that actually aligns them a little better because the teams in Europe are quite interested in the quality women's collegiate players as well. It's one of the good sort of young breeding grounds for talent coming into women's football, which doesn't exist most other places. Like there are more women that play football in the United States than anywhere else in the world right now. And it is the most popular single sort of grassroots sport that exists. The men's league still has that. And you, as somebody who works in MLS, you still have to kind of deal with that calendar, even if it's not prioritized. It's possible that we could see them get rid of that as well.
Yeah, it's possible. I think the talent has been drained out of the draft through the homegrown rules in the academies. So
it doesn't really matter that much anyway.
Yeah, usually, unless you have one of the first 3-4 picks, you could get someone talented. And there is another kind of a conundrum that teams face is that now there is a lot of good European players coming to US for college because they know that, well, we could get drafted highly, even though we might not get right away paid as much, but we get like education plus a more kind of a gentler career path that they could probably, like a lot of players, I think not every player that fails at 21 in Europe are bad players. I think a lot of them, if given a chance and, maybe they develop in 3 more years, but there is, most teams in Europe don't have time for that. So
well, plenty of players that are kicked out of an academy at age 18, which is a lot, can come play at a good level in the US collegiate system and continue to play, but then also get the education alongside of that, and maybe get to live next to the beach and have a lifestyle that's quite interesting for a European. Maybe they're in the area of slow talkers and go to the SEC, and that's going to be a little confusing for everybody. But who knows? Yeah.
So I think that so you could get one of those players at the top end of the draft. The only issue is that you have to use an international roster spot. There's only 8 of them per team. So then you're like, yes, he's talented. Yes, he can probably contribute to the first team within 6 months or maybe within a season. But I'm having to invest international spot on him for a year, which I could get a 27-year-old or 26-year-old international player. And there is, and so now this is where like different teams with different priorities and strategies. There are teams that are okay investing that international roster spot, which is valued around 250, 200 to 2. It's a sliding scale. It goes down as the season goes, but at the beginning of the season, it's 200,000 MLS money.
I can just imagine the European listeners on this being like, he's just saying words now. Like, how does this? Actually, we're not going to go into how it works. Just like think of it as magic with rules, and the rule system you don't really care about right now. Ravi can care about it, but let's ask. Were there any sexy names? Was there sex appeal that came into the league this season?
Well, if you're talking about proven names that are common names in Europe, there was a couple of free agents, Olivier Giroud and Marco
Reus. There's sex appeal right there. That man is a beautiful slap of beef.
And then both went to Los Angeles.
Of course, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why wouldn't you? And I think there is there's a French contingent building in LAFC. And the Marco Reus was an interesting deal because I think it was. I'll also kind of give an insight on something that's very unique to MLS is what they call discovery lists. So what it does, because MLS is a single entity, meaning for the outside world, player signs with MLS, not with individual teams in MLS.
It's just so bad.
Just bear with me on that. We're not going to go details there. But in order to prevent 2 teams in MLS bidding against each other, they've invented this discovery list program, which is like an archaic thing. It's like a vestige of the past.
This is monopolistic bargaining on the power of a league so that the teams are not bidding against each other for players. Meanwhile, the rest of the world can do it, but they cannot.
Yeah, so what it is that you have to put 5 players on the list. And so if someone else, someone else puts the name of, let's say, Marco Reus before you did, then you are behind them in the priority order. So they will get the first chance to negotiate with him.
5 names.
And
five.
5 names. 5
Okay.
names. You can change them anytime. Just 5 names. It used to be 7. They got to 5. Before somebody asked in the comments, can someone put Leo Messi? I think there was 2 exceptions. I think Messi and Cristiano you couldn't put on the list. But anyway.
So the Giroud transfer should have happened, I think, a year earlier. Behind the scenes, like that team was working on that deal quite a bit. And when it fell through, I think might even be the same team that had been working on this, trying to work on it at least gently for like years, was the Griezmann one, right? Like Griezmann has been desired in MLS and seems to kind of want to go, but also he's still been great in La Liga. So
yeah, he's been great. Yeah, I think Griezmann. I think the package that Griezmann is looking for, because I've heard some numbers. I think it's still a pretty heavy lift for even the most rich teams in MLS.
Yeah.
But going back to the discovery list, so I think so. The Marco Reus was interesting because there were other teams, not Galaxy, ahead of them that had the name, but Marco said, "I only want to go to America if I'm going to Los Angeles.
Right.
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not going to."
And as we've covered before, players have agency in where they move. They don't have to go by your stupid league mandate because they're negotiating to go to a place with a team, not to a league to then be allocated where it should be appropriate.
And then, how that is facilitated is now the team, let's say the team in LA, will have to negotiate with the team that has put his name on the list before them to use some MLS money as a trade to get that spot.
Monopoly money, feather bucks, like whatever we can call them.
Yeah, whatever you can. I'm not. As I said, I'm staying away from the acronyms.
TAMs, GAMs.
But anyway, that's how this works. And so some of the deals, like Olivier Giroud or Marco Reus, or like someone like a Griezmann or Morata, or like big names like that, it takes a long time to get the deals done.
Yeah.
And then you have, it's like you're talking, there's the league office, then there is the team, and there is the player representation. Now you're talking also different legal systems. Like, let's say you're getting a player from Spain and America, then there is a language barrier plus a different legal system. So the contracts are written here and then sent there, redlined, and it can go along. And so a deal like Griezmann, it's almost like once the agreement is there, it will take much longer than, let's say, if it is within Europe, it would happen within hours or maybe a day, just because there is no immigration process. There is no, it's all pretty standard, homogenized type stuff. So maybe now with Brexit, I think transfers into Britain and out of Britain are also a little bit more messier than in the past.
Coach transfers as well. We saw one from Stockport County get denied a move to Real Madrid because of Brexit reasons, which is, and then we've obviously seen the other way around. I think Barnsley had a coach most recently that they had signed previously that wasn't allowed to have a work permit, and they had to like actually make a different set of choices. It's a nightmare, and England has really screwed themselves in this way. I think one of the interesting things about MLS is that they also are highly connected to South America, and will sometimes move quite aggressively for South American talent or Latin American talent, more so than the rest of the world. The rest of the world sort of is happy with that for the most part because they get to see those players go into a league that they understand somewhat well. And then also, when we were at StatsBomb, we kept getting asked to do more and more South American leagues. So like, could you do Ecuador? Could you do Peru?
Uruguay. Like, wow. I think I remember asking you.
I was like, there's only 3 million people in this country. What do you want?
and the stadium quality is except maybe 2 or 3 stadiums in Montevideo, everything is just like
they don't even have fences to keep out dogs, Ravi.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. So one other thing, like with the discovery list, I know it like super weird and like very American. I say, these Americans, right? I don't know if you guys have been paying attention what Spurs did with Johnny Cardoso at Betis. It's very much the discovery list. They negotiated the right I think first refusal, if I want to simplify things, is that they did not sign him, but I think they paid some amount to say we have the priority to sign him first next summer or whatever period they signed it for. And if someone else, if they don't decide to sign, and let's say a different club signs Johnny Cardoso, then they get a sell on him, and that's basically they're protecting whatever they paid Betis. That in the case of we don't sign him or we don't like him anymore in 6 months or a year.
Does that feel legal? I feel like we're getting into complicated territory here.
Yeah,
I'm used to complicated territory, but
I'm sure like they, lawyers got compensated enough to make sure that all the paperwork is good. That's
anybody else that we should be aware of, or that other people listening to this podcast should be aware of, have now sort of shuffled into the United States ecosystem?
Alexei Miranchuk. He was more of a bit part player at Atalanta, but he was really good in Russia prior to that. Really good player. He's going to play like a number 10. He's a very good player. I've only watched him. He's only played, I think he started one game and came on in another game. He looked pretty good. I think it was a good signing. Ezequiel Ponce, he's an Argentinian who was playing in Greece. He was playing in Houston in the town where I am right now, in the club where I worked with earlier, up until earlier this season. He's also another a good signing. It looks good, like when you watch him. He's a very high quality player. Obviously, I mentioned Reus and Giroud. Tim Ream is in the US.
I'm impressed that his legs have not fallen off yet.
Yeah. And Luis O'Brien, another interesting loan to LAFC from Nottingham Forest. And these are the type of deals that MLS wasn't able to do in the past. That get these type of players that are still in the prime, or to come and play in America. Like I think that's kind of where the league is changing.
It used to be strictly a retirement league, and you would see, occasionally, like once every 4 years or something, you'd see a really big superstar come over. So David Beckham was one of the first ones. Zlatan, obviously. There have been a variety of other ones. Obviously, Messi is the most recent and possibly most notable. Like, is he more notable than the Beckham move? Maybe not. Maybe Beckham was bigger. But the other thing that you're seeing is like they're happy to bring in young players under the U22 provision that they've got. Mm-hmm. So they do have some element of developmental league. And then some of the European giants have actually seen MLS players succeed when they bring them over young. And I think one of the things that they found is that physically these players are sometimes superior. Like the US and Canada both turn out some real exceptional athletes, and sports science athletics is one of the things that, at least from a younger area, seems the US has a little better development on. Technical, much less so, but they will turn out runners.
Yeah, I mean, one good example is among the slew of Chelsea signings, they signed a player from Atlanta, Caleb Wiley, left back. He's been doing really well in Strasbourg. I think he's been on the field, and I might have joked last couple of weeks that for me he's the best signing of Chelsea because he's playing, even though he's not for Chelsea.
Is he a left back too? So that just already like elevates him a couple levels. The one thing that America has always done well, and in fact it was one of the only things that you could rely on, was they would have good goalkeepers, because all the American kids play handballs or hand skills games when they're growing up. So because we have all the hand-eye coordination games, at least we were able to stop shots. That was the only reliable producing technical skill that we would have.
Yeah, and then there was a couple of other deals that fell through, mostly due to the window deadline mismatch. Mikel Almiron, I'm sure that was widely publicized.
Was he going back to Atlanta?
No, I think it was Charlotte.
Okay.
Old Dean Smith was trying to get him, and another one was Kelvin Stengs from the Netherlands. That was another one that fell through in the last few days.
Was he an AZ player originally? Yeah. And also looked like he was going to be quite impressive. It's one thing that there is a bit of history there. U.S. has decided that occasionally they'll try and rejuvenate young Dutch prospects, also who almost exclusively speak English very well as well. So it makes the transition a little bit easier.
Yeah, and then another one that fell through was, I think, Steven Bergwijn from Ajax. Just because I think there was not enough time, and then the deadline pressure and price and all of that didn't work out. And I think he ended up going to the Middle East.
He did. He went to Saudi, and Ronald Koeman said very mean things about his choice to go to Saudi, which got him into some hot water with everybody involved. But so thank you for the look at the oddities of the MLS window and for all of your other knowledge. Good luck on your move cross country. Hopefully we'll talk to you in a week or two.
Thanks, Ted. Talk to you soon.
All the best, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Transfer Flow podcast. If you want to catch us on other mediums, we are obviously on the normal podcast. We are on YouTube, where you can see us in video format. And we have this little newsletter that is growing pretty rapidly and has had great feedback. It does different content. So transfer grades are still going on there for international teams. It's at thetransferflow.com/subscribe. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us eventually on LinkedIn. Robbie's pulling for LinkedIn. He wants to have the professional network plugged in. And certainly you can find us on X/Twitter/Threads, where we will occasionally do interesting, entirely different content than either here or on the newsletter. So thank you very much. Give us 5-star reviews. Tell everybody how much you love us, and we will see you again soon.